Thank you. So my name is Clark Fredrickson. I lead industry product marketing at AWS for all of our vertical services, including AWS Clean Rooms, which we'll talk about in a second. And I'm so excited to be here with all of you guys today. Hopefully the conference is going well so far for everyone. We're here to talk about monetization. And I think the single biggest topic right now that's going on in monetization and advertising and media is around privacy and how to better protect consumer data while also delivering great advertising experiences and earning ad revenue. It's also come with one of the biggest, most disruptive periods of that in that time right now, as privacy regulations and increased focus on wanting to protect data basically have driven the loss of what the ad industry has long used to plan campaigns or measure campaigns or deliver personalized ads. And those things are called identifiers, and this loss of identifiers means that all the companies in the value chain in advertising that work together and collaborate basically can't collaborate in the same way they used to. So data clean rooms have become this new solution that enable companies to collaborate while protecting data. The first thing, before we go any further, how many people in the audience know what a clean room is? Okay, I see like 20% of the hands. So maybe we'll start with, what is a data clean room? And then go from there. So data clean rooms basically are analytics environments that enable multiple companies to query their combined data without actually revealing any of the underlying data with the other company. So the idea is that I have my data, you have your data, and we can run queries across it to say, understand how many people viewed an ad without actually sharing or revealing any of the underlying sensitive information that we have, like information about our users. So they're a really interesting solution to this problem in advertising today, and that's why there's so much interest in it. The first question I want to sort of raise, Joe, what do you see as some of the use cases for clean room technology today?
Yeah, so I think rather unsurprisingly, when we speak with broadcasters and publishers, we're seeing a cross-platform story emerge and really take hold. And I think that that's unsurprising. I think that with the growth in streaming and the growth in connected devices, you're seeing increased audience fragmentation and increased inventory fragmentation. I think we'll only continue to see that accelerate. And that's really led to imagining a world where there's broadcasters with walled gardens and broadcasters without walled gardens. And the use cases that we're seeing emerge are, and the conversations that we're having, are how do I capture and create more value from my audience, right? I know my audience is on linear, I know it's streaming. How do I continue to see value from that audience and get more value? And similar to that, how do I increase my revenue streams, right? How do I drive new revenue streams from a clean room? And then most importantly, frankly, like one of the reasons why I think we're all on this stage today is how do I unify planning, fulfillment, and measurement in one privacy compliant space? And I think that that's something that AWS is doing. And interoperability is the foundation of this. Clean rooms is a big part of that. Adjacent collaborative data warehouses and native applications are another aspect of it. And I think we're really in the early stages of the adoption of these technology layers, and we'll only see them grow in the future.
Cool. And so, maybe to go down one level, what exactly does the clean room do in that sense? What's the benefit of the clean room, for those types of use cases?
Satisfy perhaps a legal demand. No one likes legal coming to their office and saying something maybe that they don't want to hear. But truly, right? In the U.S., we're probably about, give or take 5 years behind the EU when thinking about implementing privacy regulations. In many ways, maybe even a little bit more. it doesn't mean that they're not coming and that our customers are not cognizant of those. And so we're actually seeing broadcasters use clean rooms as a way to get ahead of the curve of any privacy and compliance regulations that might be coming to them. And then, to your point in the intro, it is a way to maximize audience value in a privacy compliant and safe way for planning, optimization, and measurement.
Sure. It's also a way to, better protect your own customer data and make sure that you're better protecting your users. And, beyond regulations, we just see example after example of companies not wanting to share data anymore, not wanting to hand over sensitive user information to other companies. And so clean rooms are sort of an interesting way to do that without, while still like getting the benefit of measuring a campaign or monetizing the data.
And I think in that way, there's competitive advantages that start to build from using technologies like this, right? A highly valuable owned audience. You're giving somebody a way to collaborate with others that they may, in a way that they may not would have been able to do it before.
Right. So, okay, so most of this, this is all digital advertising for the most part, or it has been so far. So, one thing that I think is interesting and particularly relevant for this event is how this works with linear audiences and linear television and broadcasting. So Rio, you've had some recent customer experience with that. What can you tell us about this?
That's a good question. So recently we've been working a lot of different organizations in media entertainment. We have one really interesting case study from Asia Pacific where we've helped a large broadcaster implement a clean room. But I think even taking a step back, I'm happy to go into details about that. I think to kind of piggyback on what you said before about why is this important? End of the day, sure, we have these privacy laws, US, CCPA, CPRA, GDPR was the first, but now there's DMA, DSA, there's all these privacy laws, and every country is now creating their own, right? And they're creating this because people are fed up with having their PII shared, with having it abused. They want to work with brands that respect their privacy, respect their PII, and that's why these governments are acting, right? They're targeting a lot of these regulations are really targeting ad tech, targeting data aggregators, targeting people who are profiling and doing practices like that. So I think that's really the foundation of this. And you really look at the web that we've known for the last 20 years, cookies, tags, trackers, that's all going away. It's going away pretty quickly. You mentioned signal loss before. We're already starting to see it. Once Chrome kills cookies, maybe next year, it's going to be a different world. Many of the third-party data sources to build models to understand consumers, those are going to go away. It's not the only source, obviously, but it's a big one. So looking at use cases for broadcast, one case study I mentioned before, we've been helping this broadcaster. Sure, they've got a lot of amazing content. They've got an incredible, like you mentioned, a trove of first-party data they've collected over the years. How do they entice their advertisers to work with them? And knowing that we're faced with a signal loss, we're faced with an environment where you can't pull third-party data the way you used to, how can you give them the assurance that you can work with them, collaborate, share data, interoperability, you mentioned it before, and do it in a privacy-safe manner? That's where the clean room comes in. So for this one example, we have the broadcaster using a clean room as more like his data onboarding location where their partners can upload their first-party data. Again, they're not really sharing it. They're sharing it in a synonymous way, so no PII is exposed. We can perform a match. We can then build a segment and push that into CDP and then run targeted advertising campaigns that we know are more effective. I think we're going to see a lot of solutions like that. That's just one example. We're seeing lots of experimentation. You mentioned it's pretty early on, but that begins to allow the broadcaster to unlock that first-party data, work with advertisers. Just the pilot that we launched with this one broadcaster, we already have 12 brands that have signed up for it. 2 were already kicked off. It's exciting just to see how much enthusiasm there was about this one solution. And I think it speaks to the fact that they want to be able to say to their customers, right? Like the Coca-Colas, the McDonald's of the world, if they want to advertise with these broadcasters, they want to say to their end, to the consumer, we're respecting your personal information.
Right. And I think one thing that what you're talking about does is it just puts a bigger and bigger emphasis on the data that you actually have about your own customer base and how people watch media or engage with your products. So like that impetus to understand your own data and keep it clean is like going to be super important in that sort of this new era.
Oh, 100%. In fact, in this new era, your first-party data becomes not only much more important than it was. I mean, a lot of the third-party sources, you can't use them anymore, right? In many instances, they'll be gone, or it'll be, to your point, too risky to use them, right, because of compliance. First-party data becomes your number one most important asset, and you're not going to want to give that away. So again, a solution like a Clean Room allows you to share information, collaborate without compromising PII, and then, it's interesting the point you said before about American companies being behind. I agree with you. But I think what's interesting is we're finding that because it was the Wild West in North America for so long with very few privacy laws, a lot of first-party data was stored and built up. I think in EU, especially Germany, a lot of companies kind of stayed away from it. So now I'm seeing a rush to, okay, well now we have to focus on first-party data more because of signal law. So it's interesting to see kind of where different organizations are based on a regulatory environment.
So now, and speaking of first-party data, so I think there's a whole partner ecosystem sort of like built around that with customer data platforms and CDPs, and so that's like one of the pillars of the monetization competency that we've launched. What about when companies just don't have first-party data and they need to rely on partners like measurement providers? So Joe.
No, it's a great question. I think we talk a lot about our publishing customers and partners that have a massive first-party data lake, and that's great. The reality is that a lot of the times we'll be working with publishers that don't necessarily enjoy a broad first-party data lake, and in that case, we start to ask the question to ourselves at Comscore in a little bit of a different way. We start to ask, like, okay, what is the value of third-party data in a first-party data world? And the answers that we come to in conjunction with our clients are a lot of times wanting to use contextual signals. So behavioral signals, using those behavioral signals to augment any data that they might have on their end. The nice thing about a clean room is that we can, like Rio was saying, perform a match, find match keys, and enrich somebody's minimal first-party data lake with third-party signals and identifiers that we have on our end. We've actually built an entire business around that. It's growing on our end, and I think it'll continue to grow in the future.
And by context, you mean rich metadata within media, or like the type of show you're watching?
Exactly. It could be a content preference. There might be some demographic information. It could be a platform preference. Using those important signals to enrich any audience data. Again, going back to what I had said earlier about these are tools that we see for broadcasters and publishers to be able to continue to capture and create value from those audiences and drive new revenue streams. So if we can use contextual signals on our end to do that in conjunction with clean rooms, that's a great way for publishers to come back to those pillars and drive more revenue.
Got it. So it's not just scary data, it's sensitive data. It could be very generic data that you want to match with any other company and do it while protecting it or retaining the intellectual property that you have.
Yeah, generic and in all cases really privacy safe.
Got it. Something we haven't talked about yet is this concept of entity resolution, where basically you have two different data sets and you want to match them or deduplicate them or understand if there's an overlap or see if this email address is the same as that, or if this corporate name is the same as that corporate name, or this product is the same as that one. But that's kind of a fundamental technology that actually all clean rooms need, because you have to, if you're going to join data, you need a join key, something to match it on. So Dr. Nagy, talk to us about that, and how does that kind of entity identity space play with this whole clean room story?
Yeah, absolutely. I think just adding on to what my co-panelists kind of talked about, At AWS, I think we see a concentric circle between measurement, clean room, and identity. So there's if you kind of form an intersection line, a couple of things are happening in each of the space. And we talked about this whole convergence of linear and digital. One of the most important thing with that, the effect on that is to unify the audiences themselves. What does a customer 360 truly look like? Because the footprint of the audience is across devices, across platforms, and across places that's outside the broadcaster's ecosystem, from where they shop, what they bought, what they have searched along the way. So at AWS, as you know, many of you know, we came out with our own entity resolution precisely to identify the audiences as the grounding step to make sure that the data collaboration happens with the perspective of what the audience set is matchable. So entity resolution, if I can say, is the heart of this story of measurement in clean room. To first, we identify the audiences, who thy audiences are. Once they are there, it enables collaboration and enrichment with first party, second party, and third party data. Because we are moving in a world where our customers are getting bombarded with multiple data sets. And they want to make sure that they can add a layer, they can top up each data identification with nuances, with behavioral, contextual along the way. So I think this is very important. The third thing I want to just briefly touch about is that the measurement world is going through its own tectonic shift. And we have a partner here who is, we call them the alternate currencies, but they are actually becoming mainstream currencies, I call them. Because now the world has moved from a panel-based world to an addressable audience where you can target them. So I think we are at a pivoting point where data is the new oil, and unification, both from not just from a stack perspective, but from a data perspective, is going to be driven by these fundamental shifts. And I think clean room and entity resolution are tied closely for the future.
And we've seen that examples from customers like that, like Fox, for example, shared last year that they're using clean rooms to kind of link together their linear data with their digital data and sort of create one unified kind of audience, for example. They're also building on AWS for contextual signals, for example, from their own audiences. So all these things are kind of coming together, like with an increased emphasis on first-party data, and then bringing in and enriching that with partners.
Absolutely.
It's a huge kind of brave new world, so to speak, as these things that we've all done for years in advertising now have to be redone completely to basically perform the same use cases, but just now with total security and data protection throughout. So it's very different.
Yeah, and Clark, it's interesting. Over time, we're seeing pieces of this architecture emerge, and I feel like the complete picture is starting to come into focus. I'm not saying there's one right solution, but as with the shift to first-party data, we started seeing CDP became a thing. They go back a few years, but the modern CDP, maybe 3 years ago, that became very mainstream. I joked that this last year was the year the clean room, that finally became an accepted piece of architecture that most brands know they're going to need. And identity resolution, I think, will be the thing everyone talks about next year. It's already out. Obviously, entity resolution launched this year, but whether identity resolution sits in your CDP as a native part of that architecture, or it sits in a more composable architecture where maybe floats off to the side, in this new environment, you need it.
Yeah.
That's why when I saw entity resolution launch, it was exciting.
Yeah, it was exciting, and soon I'm not revealing anything new, but we will be adding new partner capabilities with companies like LiveRamp. So, activation partners will be added into that service as well, and so it's something worth checking out. Now, we've talked a lot about clean rooms. We talked about this concept of entity resolution. Talk about building some of this stuff. Is this really, really easy, or is it really, really hard? Maybe Dr. Nagy, talk to us about how you actually put these things together.
Yeah, and just before I go there, I think you touched about the very important point of activation. I just want to add one more thing. I think the essential bit of all the matching, as we say, is the advances of machine learning and using the capability of a rule-based matching and making sure that the human discrepancies is minimized and there is more substantial matching or concurrent records that could be distant. I think that's playing a very important role. Now, to your point about how easy it is, I think the fundamental thesis of why AWS came out with Clean Rooms is to make sure that data residency is as important as differential privacy. So without moving it across, because as many of our customers and collaboration is happening on AWS along the way, without moving the data, how easily with few clicks you can collaborate. That's how easy AWS Clean Room is. That you can set up on, don't need to move the data, just allow some permissions, click activate, and it does a lot of the collaboration, matching and the things that are core to Clean Room. I think the other important thing that what we are also now seeing out here is we are now experimenting with new solutions where you don't even need to go to the console. So we are putting what we call it as orchestration layer, a business solution layer, where again, back to this point about we see that there are so many data sets that are being, coming or being knocked at our customer's door. You want to make sure that quickly realize that, is the match effective? Am I adding more value to my customer audiences? Am I augmenting them? Am I making sure that I can better make it more addressable and targetable? So we are building a composable layer to make sure that we can help bring in disparate data sets, and through a completely low-code, no-code environment, we can help make this collaboration and join seamless. So to answer your questions, it's absolutely easy. If you are not, as I said, if you're not SQL friendly, we have even an option to go beyond that with this orchestration layer. So more to come on that, as you said. I think that intersection line between entity and Clean Room is our next project. So a lot of cool things coming.
I think the only thing I'd add to how challenging it is to set something up is the collaborative piece between humans and teams that have to get involved many times. And I see this at Comscore firsthand. On our end, there's commercial teams, there's product teams, there's engineering teams, there's technology partners like AWS, there's the customer, there's multiple teams on their end. And so in a lot of ways, the technology is there and is set up in a way for us to easily access and use. The most challenging part a lot of the times is just getting folks coordinated on the phone.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, it's interesting you say that too. I mean, I totally agree. But setting up a clean room is not hard. I mean, even with AWS Clean Room, you're really just putting data into S3 and then pushing it into the clean room environment where it's anonymized. But where we've run into a lot of challenges in these projects has been automating the process.
Yep.
Your client's going to be pushing a new file every day or every week or twice a day or hourly, whatever it's going to be, going from different environments, different security settings, even potentially across different clouds. That's where we usually run into issues.
Yeah.
And you do need some technical horsepower.
Right.
And I just want to add one more thing. I think the essential part of clean room collaboration is also about data normalization. So one of the things that we offer as part of this whole setup is, because each of them has to be quote unquote normalized so that they can collaborate. So clean room comes with the stack, like things like AWS Glue and all that stuff. What it helps is, again, through some clicks, you can normalize and make sure that these two, there is data interoperability, there is ease of collaboration. So Clean Room is, as I said, is a foundational piece, but the whole AWS stack, which enables data normalization, and over and above, you can have analytics, quick site dashboards along the way. So a lot of things can be built which are business-centric, monetization-centric, with minimal efforts.
Right.
But I agree, it's the humans to get together is the part.
There's one more piece I would add on that, which is that, in a sense, it's a marketplace type of solution because you have to work with another company. And so one of the things that can be really hard or really easy is if that other company, has data in the same country as you, is using the same cloud provider as you. And so with AWS, we've have, I think, hundreds of thousands of data lakes running on Amazon S3 right now, for example. So, we do see a lot of customers, who are in the cloud already, like working together, more easily. But the residency piece is going to be really interesting to see, especially as you have companies that might not have data in one region or might have data in another region and can't move it, to see how that evolves kind of over time. Speaking of time, we probably have time for one last question. So, rapid fire. So, what's the big impending event, that is going to kind of tip clean rooms from like, oh yeah, this is important, you should pay attention to this, to, oh my God, we're late because we don't have it?
I think it's already happening. I think that event happened. I think the recent raft of privacy laws has pushed a lot of people, but I think what's greasing the skids is the shift to a composable architecture that you mentioned. I think that it's opened up possibilities to have different flavors of this. The future's not going to be data moving around. It's going to be data sitting in places, and you're connecting with reverse ETL, APIs, et cetera. So I think we're already getting there. I mean, who knows? Maybe there could be some more privacy violations or things like that, or lawsuits that accelerate it. But I think it's already happening.
Joe?
I might give a very American answer and say politics and sports. So we're seeing for the first time this year, multiple streaming platforms have exclusivity over some pretty major sporting events in the United States. That only drives further inventory and audience fragmentation. And then next year, everybody's well aware there's a pretty big political cycle in the US. We don't have to explain that. And I think there's going to be about projections north of $10 billion of spend next year across all elections in the United States. When you have platforms, social media platforms that have banned that spend, it has to go somewhere. And in an increasingly fragmented world, it falls to connected devices, it falls to streaming, it continues to fall to linear, and those are very highly valuable audiences to folks that want to win elections.
Okay.
I think I use this concept in the advertising called pitch to pay, but now it's moved from prospect to performance. So I think the pivoting point is advertisers want value for every dollar that they put in. So attribution is going to be a tipping point for the rapid scale adoption of clean rooms.
Okay. Thank you, everyone. Thanks for joining us. Joe, thank you. Rio, thank you. Dr. Nagy, thank you very much. For those of you that want to learn more about AWS Clean Rooms, you can go to our website and learn about the new monetization competency that we launched this week on the AWS website as well. Thanks very much, and thanks to the panel.